Hello, I'm Dr. Jason Lemieux from PhysioMed, and with us we have Steve Delaney from Pinnacle Wellness. We're going to go over a couple of simple stretches that you can do while standing at work just to help to loosen the hips up and avoid getting low back pain. So the first stretch we're going to do is for our hamstrings. Hamstrings are a real common stretch for people to do, but the mistake most people make is that they bend from their spine when they're trying to get down. They try to touch their head to their knee, rounding their back. Steve's got a stick behind his back. You can see that he's actually creating movement from his spine as he bends forward. That's the last thing we want to do. Yeah, you might feel your hamstring stretch, but you're putting more pressure on your spine. What we're going to do instead is Steve's going to hinge from his hips. Now he's getting even more stretch in his hamstrings, even though he's not moving very far, because his back is nice and straight as it forward bends. All the movement's coming from his hips, guaranteeing that he's stretching his hamstrings. So if we get rid of the stick, just to show how we can do this without that alignment tool, he can just put his hands behind his back, pull his shoulders back, keep that back nice and tall. And again, what you're going to realize is you don't have to go very far for this. We want to start thinking about stretching as kind of an act of efficiency, meaning that a lot of people think the more they move, the better the stretch, and that's not true. If I can keep my stretches efficient, I don't have to move very far, and we'll get a huge stretch. So he hinges from the hips with a nice straight back, fantastic hamstring stretch. So now that we stretched out the back of the thigh, we're going to try to stretch out the front of the thigh and the front of the hip. So we're going to stand in a nice split stance, kind of a semi-lunge stance. And what Steve's going to do is he's going to try to flatten out his lower back. So it's a little tough to see, but whatever curve he's got in his back, we can see a little bit of a curve there. He's going to tilt that underneath him. Now his upper back is staying nice and straight, just like it is. He's keeping that good posture. But again, that little bit of a tilt of the pelvis, flattening out that low back, we're going to feel a big stretch through the front of that right thigh, front of that right hip. So we'll quickly switch legs just to demonstrate the other side. We'll go back with the left leg. You can hold on to something to balance yourself if you need it. But again, nice and tall, flattening out the back. And Steve, just show everyone where you're feeling that stretch. If you were just kind of pointing that right through that front of that left hip, front of that left thigh. Again, if we're standing for really long periods of time at work, or even if we're sitting for long periods of time at work, the inactivity or the lack of movement is going to create tension in the front of the hip. It's going to pull our pelvis forward and create a lot of pain in the low back. So that may not be something that's intuitive. If our back's sore, we may not think about stretching out the front of the hip. But this is arguably the most important stretch you can do to avoid low back pain. Very good. And then the last thing, we're going to try to get the back of the hip itself. So we're going to go over to a stable implement. So he's going to grab a handle. He's going to get his leg into kind of a figure four position like we saw there. And he's going to sit back into his hip. Same rule as the hamstring. He's bending from his hip. He's keeping that back as tall and as straight as possible. Let your back round out for a second there, Steve. We're not going to let our back round out like that and bend from the spine. We're going to keep our chest up, sit back into the hip. And again, you don't have to move very far before you feel a huge stretch through the back of, in this case, his right hip. Very good. So quick stretches for the hamstrings, the hip flexors, and the glutes. You do those three stretch, 10, 15 seconds each side. Whole process only going to take like maybe 2 minutes tops. Throughout the day, do that. We won't have any low back pain.